Hi, it's a pleasure to be here today to talk a little bit about my experience. When was asked to talk in this event, I really was thinking what could be interested for this audience to hear about. And well, they said to talk about Costa Rica because that's what I'm currently working. And so I decided that the best thing I could talk is about what I'm doing right now with the producers in Costa Rica. So it's great to be here. And before I start, I would like to, sorry, this is weird. Yeah. I would like to ask you, just out of curiosity, what does direct trade mean for you? Would someone like to share their opinion? Anyone? Come on, don't be too shy.
Who's doing direct trade here? Oh, maybe volume a bit down on that one.
Because I know people have different thoughts about what direct trade means, but there is not a clear concept. So, nobody?
Ole?
Come on.
Well, to me it means that you buy the coffee directly from the farmer. Of course you have to use an exporter usually, or maybe even an importer. But well, you communicate directly with the farmer and you buy the coffee, and you have to go through the necessary levels in between you and the farmer to get the coffee. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's just having, or it's a very dreamy way of saying it, but for me, it means that you have total traceability of a lot, for instance. Okay. You know where it's from, what kind of variety, who farmed it, when it was picked, la la la. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing your opinions. And for me, it was very important that when I was going to talk about sustainable trade models, that you keep in mind during my presentation that the word sustainable means or is related with all these concepts: environment, bearable, social, equitable, economic, and viable. So just for you to keep in mind when I keep saying sustainable during the presentation, that is sustainable has a wide meaning. So this is Tarazu. This is where I grew up, and surrounded by coffee farms, like you can say. And this is my family. So actually, before I start to go more into the direct trade and all this, I think it's important that you understand where I come from in order to understand this presentation. So I thought many of you know where I come from, but not all of you. So my family decided to start a trade project back in 2013. We were working in the commercial industry before for many years, for many generations. And we realized that we needed to add value to our product because the coffee prices were low in the sea market, as you know. So we decided to start what we call in Costa Rica a micro mill. And when we started this, we wondered many things. We didn't know too much about how the whole industry works. And at that time, I was graduating from international business school, and I really wanted to learn more about the coffee industry because I thought if we're going to start to sell this product, we have to learn what we have, and we have to understand the market we work with. So I started a journey. I packed my bags and left Costa Rica. And the first country I started doing some research about specialty coffee was the United States. there I somehow met people in coffee, and they gave me the opportunity to do like a internship for a couple months. And then after that, I went to Australia, where I also was working there with a roaster in a coffee shop as a barista, and learned a little bit about cupping. And then after 3 months in Australia, I remember people were talking about all these things that roasters are doing in Scandinavia, that the industry there was becoming bigger and pretty interesting things happening there. So that's when I actually contacted him, as he said, and I started to visit different roasters around Europe and doing some internships with some coffee shops in Europe as well. And for me to see this other side of the industry coming from the coffee farms was very interesting. I remember people were like surprised to see that I was just traveling to try to learn about coffee. And they were very happy to teach me what they knew about the market, but they also wanted to learn from me, from my experience and my point of view about what we're doing in the farms and what I thought about they were doing in this side of the industry. So I remember everything really called my attention, like simple things that for you, for example, latte art competitions, the trade shows, these simple things were for me like so exciting, and I really wanted to see and understand better. So as you can see in the pictures, I started copying more, just doing some barista work. And this was also at a trade show in the United States. So it was really inspiring for me to see all this. And the interesting thing about this is that when we are in the farms and when we work with coffee every day, we don't realize how valuable coffee is. You know, like for us, it's just another product. And I started to understand better that coffee, that's why we call it, after all, grano de oro, the gold bean, because it's very valuable. And some people, including farmers, don't realize about this. So after I came back home, I really was inspired, and I really wanted to start something. I wanted to make a change because I knew there were things missing in the farms. And so I started thinking. I remember I came back home. I shared with my family the experience I had during more than a year that I was traveling. And I remember my dad was one of the persons that gave me some guidance. And he said, I think many of the farmers in our community need somebody to guide them and to connect them to the other side of the industry. So that's pretty much what I wanted to do. And I remember the first week I went around different farms in my community, visit them, try to just do some research about what were they doing in the micro mills, if they were happy, like just simple things like that. What practices were they doing? And I found out during my conversations with producers that they weren't happy. Most of them weren't happy. They were always telling me that they are not getting paid on time, or that they're not selling the coffees, there is not good markets for them, and the prices are low. So I started to hear all these things. And during my trips, I actually invite some of the buyers, some of the roasters to visit. I didn't know if they're gonna come. You know, we always very welcoming in the farms, and we invite everybody. But at the end, actually, I was surprised. I had, like that same harvest when I came back, more than 5 roasters and buyers coming to visit my family's farm. And that was really amazing for us. So I prepared in order for them when they were coming. And look for samples so we can actually see if we can, or if I actually could help some of the farmers to sell their coffees. And that's what we did. During the buyers and roasters visits, we cup and we went around, visit different farms, and it was like a really good experience for me to see that actually we were finding good coffees, nice coffees, and that they thought there was potential in the farms. And this is, yeah, when we visit with other buyers and roasters, different farms. And it was always very good for them to see that coming from me, a young person, that I kind of could communicate well among the producers that most of the time are men. So that was another challenge for me. And when we went around and visit the farms, I remember I started asking the farmers, what do you think we can do to improve your situation? Because remember, some of them weren't really completely happy. And many people told me, or the farmers told me, how can we reduce cost throughout the coffee supply chain? And how can we improve our prices? So we started to brainstorming, and I remember the main ideas were this: eliminate the middleman and sell the coffee directly to the roaster and consumer. And this was coming not just from the farmers, but also from buyers and roasters. So now that I think about it, at that time it was very romantic and excited. These ideas were very romantic and excited. But I think I didn't realize many things at that time. And that's what I'm going to explain you more. I had to say that this phrase here, be careful on what you as buyer put a producer to do. And this is not just about when you talk to a producer and try to buy coffee. It's not just about this. It's many things. We have every time more and more people, especially young people with not experience, coming to the farms and tell farmers to do these crazy ideas. They want to experiment and this and that. And I'm not saying it's not good. Of course, you should share your opinion and your knowledge, or give feedback to the producers. That's the best you can do. But when you do it, have some knowledge and just research before you're going to give farmers your opinion, or you're going to put a farmer to do something. So at the end, when I was coming and brainstorming with all these farmers, we said, I remember I asked me if this trade model was achievable to just sell directly to the roasters without having, a trader helping or giving us the service. And I asked other farmers that were doing it, and of course it's achievable. You can do that. It's not impossible. Everybody can learn how to do the export and import process. And the other question I asked me was, is this trade model sustainable? And the other question was, is this what we call direct trade? So, I started to wonder about many things. A lot of things weren't clear at that time. And I like to refer to economies of scales in this presentation, just for us to understand better how things work in general. And as you can see here is the cost advantage that arises with increased output of a product. To explain better about economies of scale, I like to do an analogy about, on one side, a producer that wants to start a micro mill, and on the other side, a micro mill that would like to start to export or do direct trade. And the first case, a producer that would like to start a micromill, when a producer wants to start a micromill, they need to, I think they should get more information and education about how things work in the industry before they decide to do that. Because we had many cases where producers really didn't know what they were doing. They decided to invest in this huge operation, spend a lot of money, and at the end, what happened? They went bankrupt because they couldn't sell their coffees, or simply they were doing bad business in general. So this is a case, I like to say, a small farmer that is producing maybe 50 bags. I question myself, is it worth it for these farmers, the small farmers? Remember that Costa Rica, most of the farmers are medium to small size farmers. And I started to ask me if it makes sense for them to actually start a micromill operation. And a lot of the times I ask myself this, it makes sense related this with economy of scales, because sometimes they can cover the cost because their production is just too small. They need a certain amount of volume for them to be able to do money. And that's what some of them might not understand, or they don't realize. Another thing that was important is for them to have access to the market, of course. And as you saw, as I explained before, they weren't having really great access to the market. And also they were getting low price, as I mentioned before, bad quality control, so they weren't really cupping their coffees, didn't know too much about moisture content, for example, and still some of them don't know much about that. And for me, one of the most important things was the lack of information and knowledge. That was one of the main problems I found among producers in Costa Rica. So the other example is a micromill that wants to start to export, or that would like to start to export. I asked me the same question. Is it worth it for a micromill to start to export their own coffee? And because of economy of scales, I realized it was also, this could depend on the volume, if they could actually cover the costs, even for a producer that is doing 1 container or that is doing 8 containers. So I wanted to find out more about this specific topic. If the micromills that were a little bigger, if it was working for them to export their own coffees. So I went and interviewed my friend Diego Guardia at Hacienda Sonora. This is a farm in Central Valley in Costa Rica. And I wanted to give this example because these people are very experienced. They have more than 20 years that they've been working in the specialty coffee market. So they've been through many things. And when I interviewed Diego, I asked him, can you explain me how do you start from the beginning until now? And he was saying that it was pretty funny, actually, because the same things that I was thinking at the beginning when I decided to get more into this industry, he was also thinking about doing. But he actually did it. He actually exported his own coffee, and he sold it to the roasters and everything. And he said to me that after maybe a couple of years, he realizes this wasn't working for them. This was not sustainable for them. So I asked him, why, Diego? Why is this happening? Why is that it's hard for me to believe because you're producing 8 containers every year. It seems like enough volume for you to do a sustainable business. And the first thing he explained me was the economy of scales, as I explained before. That was the whole point about talking about that. And then the other thing he said is the financing. So I don't know if you probably know how important it is for us to get paid. We're selling a product, doesn't matter what product, you have to pay for your product. And it's a gift to give. And sometimes it feels like in this industry, people forget that coffee is a product like something else. When you go to a store, you buy something, what do? You give money. You don't run out without paying your product. So it's the same with coffee. And I think one of the most risky parts about this industry is the financing. So another thing that we were talking with Diego was that in this industry, we are all small companies, and the ability to pay or the cash flow is not great, as we all know, unfortunately. So it is hard sometimes for small companies, small importers, exporters, to actually have enough money to pay for the coffees. So with all this, there is a risk. And I think farmers are taking already enough risk at the farm level. Oops, I don't know what happened. So farmers are taking already enough risk at the farm level for them to risk another thing. And this also goes with the quality, because there is a reason for certain companies to take over these risks. They're not there just because there is a risk. And we're in the specialty coffee industry, so quality is one of the biggest thing for us. We want to deliver beautiful coffees to our roasters and to the final consumer. So there has to be someone that can take over this responsibility. And another important thing we realize is the expertise. Each of us, each player in the industry and through the coffee supply chain have responsibility. And there is a reason for each of us. So the farmer, I think, is already a lot of work to manage a farm, to go into something else. I think we conclude when I was talking with Diego that we should specialize and we're better at what we're better at. So the farmers should specialize and should focus in their farm. That's what they're good at, right? The roaster should specialize also at your work. You're roasting coffees. And of course, you can give, again, feedback to the farmers and give your opinions. But each one has a responsibility in this industry. And the other thing that was very important when we talk about this was the efficiency. So we want to be efficient in this industry. Remember, we're working with coffee. It's a product that is changing all the time. And in order to give and bring good coffees in good conditions, we need to work efficient in this industry. Another important thing is that a lot of these farmers don't have the tools to market their coffees. So we know nowadays marketing is a very important thing. And these producers really don't have access to this. So that's why we came out to all these conclusions. So at the end of my conversation with Diego, I asked again. I asked myself, well, so what does direct trade means for me? And I came out to this. Direct trade means that the supply chain works in a way where nobody is taking advantage of nobody. Instead, we players work together efficiently and make a transparent business where we all win. And this is my opinion from my experience working with more than 25 families in Costa Rica. But you all can have your own conclusions, and I'm not telling you to believe this because, you know. And I put the logo of the fair trade because I wanted to compare. Like, there is a meaning and a standard for fair trade. If you go to Google, you will find in order to get this certification, you have to follow certain standards. Unfortunately, with direct trade, there is not certification, there is no meaning. We all in this industry talk about it in different ways, and I respect that, and we all should respect each other's opinion. But I think we have to be careful in what we think about this topic. And then another interesting thing I talked during my interview with Diego, he was saying to me that for him, direct trade also means simple things. For example, when we label the bags with the roaster's logo, so we know where the coffee is going, we know it has a home, and when we actually have a close relationship with our buyers and the roasters, they visit us every year, they're in constant dialogue with us, and they even become friends and family for us. So he was saying that it actually also means for him all these things. And another thing he said is that for him also means when he can negotiate the price with the buyer. So some of my conclusions after I was preparing for this presentation, and a question I like to make all of you is like, how can we create sustainable trade models? And this is my experience in Costa Rica again, but remember, Costa Rica is just one origin. There is so many origins, and we know that sometimes the way of trading the coffee might not be the best. So I like to just leave you that question. And for me, one of the things that was very important, or some of the things that were very important to remember, is that there is not a recipe to actually find the best trade model, because every farmer is different. Every country is different. So we have to adapt to every single farm and country. So this trade model might work for Costa Rica, but that doesn't mean that it's going to work for other countries. And the other important thing that we need to keep in mind is that there is a reason for every player in this supply chain, and that the best way to answer this question is to communicate, to learn and research, and actually get better education about what we're saying out there. And also to be able to work together, like Marisabel and Moises were saying before. There is a work team behind all this, so that we should keep in mind that it's very important to work as a team. And that's it.